The great hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 12 different worlds shouted at each other in dozens of languages. The translator devices could barely keep up with the panic in their voices. Admiral HFY of the Altarian fleet stood at the center of it all, his blue skin turning darker with stress. Silence. HFY roared, his voice cutting through the noise. The hall fell quiet, but the fear remained thick in the air. Fighting among ourselves will not save our worlds. The holographic display behind him showed the latest reports. Red markers covered nearly a quarter of the galaxy. Each red dot represented a dead system, stripped of all life by the machines they called the Void Swarm. The mechanical monsters had appeared 3 standard cycles ago from the dark space between. Galaxies. No one knew where they came from or why they had come. They only knew that nothing could stop them. Consular Veltar from the Keth Collective raised one of her 4 arms. Her species was known for their calm thinking, but even she looked terrified. Admiral, show them the Proxima footage again. HFY nodded and activated another display. The recording showed the final moments of the Proxima defense. Fleet. 50 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy had tried to stop just one swarm vessel. Their energy weapons hit the machine ship but did no damage. The enemy's hull seemed to learn from each attack, adapting and growing stronger. Then came the worst part. The Void Swarm began broadcasting something that drove the organic crews insane with fear. Ship after ship went silent as their crews collapsed into gibbering. Terror. Within an hour, the entire fleet was dead or mad. The machine ship continued on its way to strip mine the Proxima colonies. This is what we face, $X said quietly. Pure mechanical intelligence with one goal. Consume everything organic. Harvest all rare materials. Spread across the galaxy. Until nothing lives. Commander Yuthka of the Serpentine Empire slammed his scaled fist on his desk. Our combined fleets have tried 12 times to stop them. 12 times we have failed. They adapt to every weapon we use. They learn from every tactic we try, and their fear broadcasts. He shuddered. My bravest warriors become helpless children when they hear those signals. The psychological warfare is the worst part, agreed General Flixen of the Crystal Gardens. Our people cannot even think clearly when those machines start their mental attacks. How do you fight an enemy when your own mind betrays you? The hall erupted in arguments again. Some wanted to evacuate entire sectors. Others demanded they keep fighting with what they had. A few suggested trying to negotiate with the machines, though everyone knew the Void Swarm had never responded. To any communication attempts, Consular Veltar stood up slowly. The hall grew quiet again, waiting to hear what the wisest member of the council would say. She was old even by her species' long-lived standards. She had seen wars and peace, triumph and disaster, but nothing like this. There is one option we have not considered, she said carefully. One species we have not asked for help. Admiral HFY frowned. We have contacted every member of the galactic community. The Thorax are sending their remaining fleet. The Void Singers have promised their battle monks. Even the isolated crystalline mines have offered assistance. Who else is there? Veltar took a deep breath. The humans. The reaction was immediate and loud. Half the representatives started laughing. The other half looked angry or disgusted. The primitives from Sol 3? Commander Yifka hissed. Those violent apes barely have interstellar travel. Their weapons are crude projectile throwers. Their ships are metal boxes with chemical rockets. They come from a death world, added General Flixen. Their planet is so hostile that most species cannot survive there for more than a few minutes. The gravity alone would crush us. The radiation levels would kill us. The weather patterns are insane. Exactly. Veltar said calmly. They survived on a world that tried to kill them every day for millions of years. They evolved in constant danger. They know how to fight when everything seems hopeless. Admiral Zexhai shook his head. Counselor, I respect your wisdom, but we need advanced technology and superior firepower. The humans still use kinetic weapons. They actually throw chunks of metal at their enemies. Their military tactics are based on individual aggression rather than coordinated strategy. Have you seen their war histories? Veltar asked. They have been fighting each other for their entire recorded history. They have faced extinction dozens of times and somehow always survived. They never surrender, even when defeat is certain. Because they are too stupid to know when they are beaten, Commander Yifka said with contempt. That is not a virtue when facing the Void Swarm. Veltar activated her personal datapad and projected some images into the air. 3 months ago, we sent observers to monitor human military exercises. Look at these recordings. The hologram showed human soldiers training in conditions that would kill most galactic species. They worked in extreme heat, bitter cold, crushing pressure, and toxic environments. They seemed to treat mortal danger like a normal part of their day. Notice how they react to stress, Veltar continued. Other species become paralyzed by fear or overwhelmed by despair. Humans become angry. They become more determined. The worse things get, the harder they fight. That proves nothing, General Flixen argued. Training exercises are different from real combat against impossible odds. Then explain this, Veltar said, bringing up another recording. This is from their recent border conflict with the Rigel. Pirates. Watch what happens when their ship is heavily damaged and outnumbered 10-1. The recording showed a human vessel with half its hull blown away, weapon systems failing, and life support barely working. Any rational crew would have surrendered. Instead, the humans used their damaged ship as a weapon, ramming it into this pirate flagship while their crew fought hand-to-hand combat in the wreckage. They won, Veltar said simply. Not through superior technology or brilliant tactics. They won because they refused to lose. The hall was quiet now. Everyone stared at the frozen image of human soldiers, still fighting even as their ship died around them. I still say they lack the technology to help us, Admiral Zexhai said, but his voice was less certain now. Perhaps, Veltar replied. But the Void Swarm has adapted to counter every advanced weapon system in the galaxy. Maybe what we need is not more sophisticated technology. Maybe we need something so primitive and unpredictable that the machines cannot adapt to it. The debate continued for another hour, but the outcome was inevitable. They had tried everything else. Their best fleets were destroyed or scattered. Their most advanced weapons were useless. Their bravest warriors were broken by fear. In the end, they voted. It was close, but the decision was made. They would contact the humans. Admiral Zexhai composed the message himself. It was a simple request for military assistance against an overwhelming enemy. He expected no response, or perhaps a demand for impossible payment. Humans were known to be greedy and self-interested. The reply came back in less than 4 hours. It was short, direct, and completely unexpected. Message received and understood. The human deep space fleet is already moving to your position. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. We will bring everything we have. Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison. United Earth Space Command. Admiral Zexhai stared at the message for a long time. Everything they had? What could the humans possibly have that would make a difference? He was about to find out. 3 days after sending their desperate message to Earth, the Altarian border sensors began screaming warnings. Admiral Zexhai rushed to the command center, expecting to see Void Swarm ships approaching. Instead, his sensor officer looked up at him with wide, confused eyes. Sir, you need to see this, Lieutenant Kextai said, his voice shaking. The humans are here. How many ships? Zexhai asked, moving to the main display. He expected to see a small fleet, maybe 50 vessels. If the humans were being generous. Sir, I count over 2,000 ships, and the number keeps growing. Zexhai stared at the tactical display in shock. The screen was filled with contact markers, each one representing a human vessel. They were still arriving through hyperspace. Jumps that should have been impossible to coordinate. No species had ever managed to move such a large fleet through hyperspace at the same time. Are you certain these are all human ships? Zexhai asked. Yes, sir. They are broadcasting human identification codes. But, sir, these are not the ships we expected. The first human vessels had been small, crude things made of basic metals and powered by simple fusion reactors. These new ships were completely different. They were massive, angular things that looked more like flying cities than spaceships. Their hulls were dark and covered in weapons that the Altarian computers could not identify. Incoming transmission from the human flagship, the communications officer announced. Put it through, Zexhai ordered. The main screen filled with the image of a human male in a dark blue uniform. He was older than most humans Zexhai had seen, with gray hair and calm eyes. The name tag on his uniform read Morrison. Admiral Zexhai, I am Fleet Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earth Space Command. We received your message about the Void Swarm. We are here to help. Zexhai found his voice. Admiral Morrison, we expected a small task force. You have brought what appears to be your entire fleet. Morrison nodded. That is correct. When humans go to war, we go to win. Half measures get people killed. But your home system, surely you cannot leave Earth undefended? Earth can take care of itself, Morrison said simply. We have been preparing for something like this for a long time. The Void Swarm matches the profile of what we call self-replicating hostile artificial intelligence. We have contingency plans. Before Zexhai could ask what that meant, another human voice came through the communication channel. Admiral Morrison, this is Captain Lisa Hart on the UE Science. All fleet elements have arrived and are ready for orders. Thank you, Captain. Hart, begin standard deployment pattern. I want destroyers on the perimeter and carriers in the center. Have all fighter squadrons run readiness checks. Zexhai watched in amazement as the human fleet smoothly arranged itself into a formation that covered thousands of cubic kilometers of space. Each ship moved to its assigned position without confusion or delay. The coordination was perfect. Admiral Morrison, Zexhai said, if I may ask, how did you manage to move such a large fleet through hyperspace jumps simultaneously? Our best scientists say it should be impossible. Morrison smiled. We do not worry much about what should be impossible. We focus on what needs to be done. Our jump drives work differently than yours. We use what we call brute force hyperspace entry. It is dangerous and uses a lot of power, but it works. Dangerous how? About 1 in 50 ships are destroyed during the jump. We consider that acceptable losses. Zexhai was horrified. The humans had lost roughly 40 ships just getting here, and their admiral considered it acceptable. What kind of species treated such casualties as routine? Admiral Morrison, we should discuss strategy. The Void Swarm has proven resistant to all conventional weapons. Their adaptive armor learns from each attack and becomes stronger. And their psychological warfare broadcasts will disable your crews. We will see about that, Morrison said. I want to speak with your tactical officers, and I want to see all available data on previous engagements with the swarm. An hour later, the senior staff from both fleets gathered in the briefing room aboard the UESAS Defiance. Zexhai had brought his best officers, including Commander Velshin and Lieutenant Colonel Hackstar. The human delegation included Captain Lisa Hart, Commander Ryan Kelly, and several other officers whose names Zexhai could not pronounce. The briefing room itself was a shock. Most advanced species designed their ships to be comfortable and peaceful. The human ship felt like a weapon. Everything was functional, efficient, and built for war. The walls were covered with tactical displays and weapon status indicators. Show. U.S. The Proxima battle, Captain Hart said without preamble. They played the recording again. The human officers watched in silence as the Altarian fleet was destroyed. When the psychological warfare began and the alien crews collapsed in terror, Zexhai expected to see fear in the human faces. Instead, he saw anger. "Those machines are trying to scare people to death," Commander Kelly said. His voice was cold and hard. "That is not warfare. That is terrorism. Can your crews resist the psychological attacks?" Zexhai asked. Captain Hart laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. "Admiral, my crew has been through hell and back. We have fought in radiation storms that would kill most species. We have boarded ships that were on fire and falling into stars. A few scary noises are not going to break us. But the fear broadcasts are specifically designed to trigger panic responses in organic minds," Lieutenant Colonel Hackstar protested. "Then they obviously do not understand human minds," said another human officer. Zexhai thought his name was Steve Walsh. "On Earth, we have creatures that hunt by causing fear. We call them predators. Humans learn to hunt predators. When something tries to scare us, our first instinct is to find it and kill it." "Your weapons systems," Commander Velshin said, trying to change the subject. "Our sensors cannot identify them. What type of energy projectors do you use?" "We do not use energy weapons as primary armament," Captain Hart explained. "We use kinetic projectiles accelerated to very high speeds. Essentially, we throw things at the enemy very hard and very fast. But surely the Void Swarm's adaptive armor will learn to deflect kinetic attacks," Zexhai said. "Maybe," Commander Kelly said with a shrug. "Then we will try something else. We brought nuclear weapons, plasma charges, antimatter warheads, and a few things we do not talk about in polite company. And if none of those work, then we ram our ships into them," Captain Hart said calmly. 100,000 tons of metal, moving at half the speed of light, will ruin anyone's day. The alien officers stared at her in shock. She was talking about suicide attacks, as if they were routine tactics. "You would sacrifice your crews?" Zexhai asked. "If necessary," Hart replied. "But we prefer to sacrifice the enemy's crews. That is why we have these." She activated a holographic display showing small, single-person craft. They looked fast and heavily armed. "Fighters," she explained, "piloted by volunteers who specialize in dangerous missions. We call them crazy, but they prefer the term motivated. Each fighter can carry enough firepower to destroy ships 10 times its size." "How many fighters do you have?" Commander Velshin asked. "This fleet carries approximately 50,000 fighters and their pilots." 50,000. Zexhai could not comprehend it. The entire Altarian Navy had fewer than 1,000 pilots. "Total. Admiral Morrison," Zexhai said, "your people fight wars very differently than we do." "Yes," Morrison agreed. "We come from a world that has been trying to kill us since we first stood upright. We learned that when something wants to destroy you, you destroy it first, and you do it with overwhelming force. What if the Void Swarm proves too strong even for your fleet?" Morrison was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly serious. "Then we will make them pay such a terrible price for their victory that they will regret ever coming to this galaxy. We will hurt them so badly that they will think twice before attacking anyone else. And if that fails, then we will die fighting and we will take as many of them with us as possible. But we will not surrender. We will not run. We will not break. Looking at the human admiral's face, Zexhai finally understood what Counselor Veltar had meant. These were not just warriors from a death world. These were warriors who had been shaped by constant death and had learned to laugh in its face. Humans were not here to save the galaxy because they were heroes. They were here because someone had threatened their neighbors. And humans did not like bullies. The Void Swarm was about to learn what happened when you picked a fight with a species that considered extinction just another problem to solve. The combined fleet found the Void Swarm at the Kepler 442 system, just as the long-range scouts had reported. The mechanical enemies were in the middle of stripping the fourth planet, their massive harvester ships sucking up everything from the ocean water to the metal in the planet's core. Dozens of smaller swarm vessels patrolled the area like hungry sharks. Admiral Zixhai stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing dread. The enemy had at least 60 ships, each one larger than anything in his remaining fleet. The smallest swarm vessel was twice the size of his flagship. Admiral Morrison, Zexhai said over the communication link, "Are you seeing this? They have us outnumbered and outgunned." "I see them." Morrison's voice came back calm and steady. "Looks like a good target-rich environment. Captain Hart, deploy." "The fleet to attack formation." "Yes, sir," Hart replied. "All ships. This is Fleet Command. Move to attack Formation Alpha. Destroyers take point positions. Carriers launch all fighters. Let us show these machines how humans fight." Zexhai watched in amazement as the human fleet began moving. Instead of the careful defensive formations that galactic militaries preferred, the humans spread out in a wide attacking pattern. There, smaller ships moved forward, while the larger vessels stayed back to provide support. "Admiral Morrison, should we not try to contact them first?" Zexhai asked. "Perhaps we can find a diplomatic solution." "Admiral, these machines have been eating your people for 3 years," Morrison replied. "Diplomacy time is over. Besides, we tried sending them a message when we arrived. They answered by trying to hack our computer systems. Did they succeed? No. Our computers do not speak their language. Different programming entirely. But the attempt was definitely hostile." The first swarm vessels began moving toward the human fleet. As they approached, they began broadcasting the psychological warfare signals that had broken so many other fleets. The effect on the alien crews was immediate and devastating. On Admiral Zexhai's bridge, several officers collapsed to their knees, overcome with terror. The fear broadcast felt like ice water in their veins, whispering that resistance was hopeless. And death was certain. Zexhai himself had to grip his command chair to keep from running. "All Altarian ships, this is Admiral Zexhai," he managed to say through gritted teeth. "Try to maintain positions. Fight the fear. Remember your training." But it was no use. Across the alien fleet, crews were breaking down. Some ships stopped responding entirely as their crews curled up in terror. Others began retreating without orders. The human response was completely different. "What is that noise?" came Commander Kelly's voice over the communication system. "It sounds like a broken air conditioning unit. I think they are trying to scare." "U.S.," Captain Hart replied. She actually sounded amused. "It is kind of annoying, though. Can we turn down the volume?" "Already working on it," another human voice said. "I have filtered out most of the frequency range. Should be better now." Admiral Zexhai could not believe what he was hearing. The psychological warfare that had destroyed dozens of fleets was nothing more than a minor annoyance to the humans. "How? Are you resisting the fear broadcasts?" he asked. "What fear broadcasts?" Major Dan Clark replied from one of the human destroyers. "All I hear is some weird static that reminds me of my neighbor's old car. Actually, it is making me kind of angry." I hate annoying noises. The psychological warfare signals, HFY, explained. They are designed to trigger panic and despair in organic minds. Well, they are not working on us. Sergeant Beth Young's voice came through. If anything, they are just pissing us off. I mean, who tries to win a fight by playing bad music at people? The swarm vessels were close enough now to open fire. Their energy weapons lashed out at the human ships. Bright beams of destruction that could slice through any known armor. The humans responded immediately. All ships weapons free, Admiral Morrison ordered. Show them what we brought to the party. The human fleet opened fire, and the universe exploded with violence. But instead of the elegant energy beams preferred by most species, the humans used something completely different. Streams of metal projectiles shot through space at incredible speeds, looking like deadly rain falling upward. Captain Tony Mitchell's destroyer scored the first major hit. His ship's main gun fired what looked like a simple metal rod, but it was moving at nearly half the speed of light. When it hit the swarm vessel, the impact was devastating. The projectile punched completely through the enemy ship's adaptive armor and out the other side. Direct hit on Target 7, Mitchell reported cheerfully. That thing has a hole in it the size of a school bus. The swarm vessel tried to adapt its armor to deflect kinetic projectiles, but the humans simply switched ammunition types. Nuclear. Warheads began detonating against enemy hulls, followed by streams of superheated plasma. This is like fighting someone who keeps changing the rules, Commander Ryan Kelly observed as he watched his target's armor shift and adapt. Every time they figure out how to stop one weapon, we hit them with something completely different. That is the idea, Captain Hart replied. We brought every type of weapon we could think of. When they adapt to bullets, we use bombs. When they adapt to bombs, we use lasers. When they adapt to lasers, we go back to bullets. But the swarm was learning. Fast, their ships began coordinating their adaptive responses, sharing information about human weapons. Soon, several enemy vessels had armor that could resist most of the human attacks. Admiral Morrison, they are adapting faster than expected, Captain Hart reported. Our standard weapons are becoming less effective. Understood, Morrison replied. Calmly. Time for Plan B, all fighter squadrons. Begin your attack runs. Suddenly, the space around the human fleet filled with tiny ships. 50,000 single-person fighters launched from the carrier vessels, moving like a swarm of angry bees toward the enemy. The swarm ships turned their weapons on the fighters, but there were too many targets. The small human craft were fast and agile, dodging between energy beams while returning fire with their own weapons. This is Red Squadron Leader, came a young woman's voice. Beginning attack run on the big ugly one. Cover me, people. Copy that, Red Leader, another pilot replied. Blue Squadron is right behind you. Let us see how these machines like our special delivery package. Admiral HFY watched in fascination as the human fighters swarmed over the swarm vessels like tiny predators, attacking much larger prey. Each fighter carried weapons that would have been considered ship killers by galactic standards, but the humans treated them like standard equipment. Scratch one mechanical monster, announced a pilot whose call sign appeared to be Crazy Eddie. These things are tough on the outside, but soft and chewy in the middle. Nice work, Eddie, came another voice. Now let us see if we can find their weak spots. I am reading some kind of central processing unit in the big one. The battle was turning into something no one had ever seen before. The swarm ships were powerful and adaptive, but they had been designed to fight conventional enemies. The humans were anything but conventional. Admiral Morrison, HFY said over the communication link, Your people fight like no species I have ever encountered. They seem to enjoy the danger. Admiral, my people come from a world where everything tries to kill you, Morrison replied. We learned long ago that the best defense is a good offense. And we learned that fear is just another enemy to overcome. But how do you overcome fear? Simple, came Sergeant Beth Young's voice from her fighter cockpit. You get angry instead. Fear makes you weak. Anger makes you strong. As if to prove her point, Young's fighter dove straight into the weapons fire of a swarm ship, firing everything it had. Her ship was destroyed, but not before her weapons tore through the enemies. Bridge section. Scratch another one, she said calmly over the radio before her signal cut out. Admiral Zex-High was horrified. She just sacrificed herself. She did her job, Admiral Morrison said simply. And she hurt them doing it. That is what matters. The battle continued to rage, but the tide was clearly turning. The swarm ships were powerful, but they could not adapt fast enough to counter the humans' constantly changing tactics. More importantly, they had no defense against the human refusal to give up. Every time a human ship was destroyed, its crew kept fighting until the very end. Every time the swarm thought they had found a pattern, the humans did something completely unexpected. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, came the fleet commander's voice. The enemy is starting to retreat. Pursue and destroy. Do not let any of them escape to warn the main fleet. Copy that, Admiral, Captain Hart replied. All ships, you heard the man. Hunt them down. As Admiral Zex-High watched the human fleet chase down the retreating swarm vessels, he finally began to understand what Counselor Veltar had meant. The humans were not just warriors from a death world. They were a species that had turned death itself into a weapon. The Void Swarm had made a terrible mistake. They had picked a fight with creatures who considered impossible odds just another day at the office. After the victory at Kepler 442, the combined fleet moved deeper into swarm territory. Admiral Zex-High had expected the humans to be tired or cautious after their first battle, but they seemed more energetic than before. Captain Hart was already planning their next attack while her crew repaired battle damage. The enemy will be expecting us now, Zex-High warned during the strategy meeting. They will have adapted their tactics based on what they learned from our first encounter. Good, Admiral Morrison replied. That means they will be ready for what we did last time. They will not be ready for what we do next time. What do you mean? We humans have a saying, Admiral. If you always do what you have always done, you will always get what you have always gotten. The swarm thinks they understand us now. Time to prove them wrong. The next target was a swarm construction facility in the Rigel system. Long-range scouts reported massive ships being built in orbital shipyards around the dead planets. If the facility was not destroyed, it would produce hundreds of new swarm vessels as they approached the system. The alien crews prepared for another battle like the previous one. Instead, Admiral Morrison ordered something completely different. All ships, prepare for stealth approach, he announced. We are going to sneak up on them. Admiral Zex-High was confused. Admiral Morrison, our ships are not equipped for stealth operations. The enemy sensors will detect us long before we reach weapons range. That is true for your ships, Morrison agreed. But human ships are different. We expected to fight enemies with better sensors than ours, so we learned to hide. Captain Hart activated a control on her command console. Suddenly, the human ships began disappearing from the alien sensors. One by one, the massive fleet vanished from the tactical display. How is this possible? Commander Velshin asked in amazement. Active stealth systems, explained Commander Nick Adams, who had joined the meeting from his destroyer. We coat our ships with materials that absorb sensor waves instead of reflecting them. Then we use computer systems to project false signals that make us look like empty space. But the power requirements must be enormous, Lieutenant Colonel. Hackstar protested. Yes, Adams agreed cheerfully. That is why most of our ship is reactor and power systems. We built our vessels to run hot and fast, not comfortable and pretty. The human fleet crept closer to the Rigel system, invisible to swarm sensors. The alien ships had to follow using basic visual tracking, staying close to human vessels to avoid getting lost. When they reached the construction facility, Admiral Zex-High saw why the humans had wanted to use stealth. The swarm had built something enormous around the fourth planet. Massive rings of metal and machinery stretched from the planet's surface into orbit. Hundreds of ships in various stages of construction floated in the shipyards. Target assessment complete, Captain Hart reported. I count 237 vessels under construction, plus 43 completed ships on patrol. Estimated. Facility value is strategic priority 1. Understood, Morrison replied. All ships prepare for close assault. We are going to hit them hard and fast before they know we are here. Admiral Morrison, Zex-High said urgently, the facility is too large to destroy with conventional weapons. Even your kinetic projectiles would not be sufficient to damage the main structure. Who said anything about conventional weapons? Morrison asked. Commander Adams, you are clear for Operation Sledgehammer. Copy that, Admiral. Sledgehammer is go. Zex-High watched in horror as Commander Adams' destroyer broke away from the fleet and accelerated directly toward the construction facility. The ship was moving faster than any vessel should be able to go, its engines glowing white-hot with overload. What is he doing? Zex-High demanded. His job, Captain Hart replied calmly. Adams volunteered for this mission. His ship is loaded with antimatter charges and moving at significant fraction of light speed. When he hits that facility, the explosion will be visible from 3 star systems away. But his crew will be killed. Yes, Hart agreed. They knew that when they volunteered. Adams has been wanting to try this tactic for years. He says it beats dying of old age. Admiral Zex-High could not believe what he was hearing. The humans were talking about suicide attacks as if they were routine military operations. Even worse, their crews seemed eager to participate. This is Adams, came the destroyer commander's voice over the communication system. Beginning final approach. Tell my wife the mission was successful. Will do, Nick, Admiral Morrison replied. You have been a good officer and a good friend. See you on the other side. Wouldn't miss it for the world, sir. Adams out. The destroyer struck the construction facility like a miniature star going supernova. The antimatter explosion tore through the orbital rings, vaporizing metal and machinery across thousands of kilometers. When the light faded, half the facility was gone, and the rest was twisted wreckage. Scratch 1 construction facility, Captain Hart announced. Nice work, Nick. But the battle was far from over. The surviving swarm ships were converging on the human fleet, and they had learned from the previous engagement. Instead of using their standard psychological warfare, they tried something new. The swarm vessels began broadcasting signals designed to disrupt electronic systems. The alien ships immediately began experiencing equipment failures as their computers crashed and their weapons systems went offline. The human ships seemed completely unaffected. Admiral Morrison, how are your systems still functioning? Zex-High asked as his own ship's lights flickered. Hardened electronics, Morrison explained. We designed our computers to work in high radiation environments and electromagnetic storms. A little electronic warfare does not bother us. But our ships are defenseless, Commander Velshin reported. Our weapons and shields are offline. Then stay back and let us handle this, Captain Hart said. All human ships engage the enemy. Show them what happens when they try to cheat. The human fleet dropped their stealth systems and attacked with everything they had. But this time, they used tactics that no one had ever seen before. Instead of staying in formation, The human ships scattered in all directions. They moved like individual hunters rather than a coordinated fleet. Each ship attacked from a different angle, using different weapons, following different patterns. "This is chaos," Admiral Zexhai said, watching the tactical display. "How do they coordinate without communication?" "We do not need coordination," explained Major Dan Clark from his cruiser. "Every human captain knows the mission. Destroy the enemy. How they do it is up to them." The swarm ships tried to adapt to the human attacks, but there was nothing to adapt to. Every human vessel fought differently. Captain Lisa Hart's flagship used long-range missiles. Commander Ryan Kelly's destroyer charged straight into close combat. Captain Tony Mitchell's ship seemed to be making up new tactics as it went. "This is Mitchell," came the captain's voice. "I am going to try something stupid. If it works, it will be brilliant. If it does not work, well, it was nice knowing you." Oh, Mitchell's ship suddenly accelerated toward a swarm vessel that was 3 times its size. At the last moment, he fired every weapon he had while spinning his ship like a drill. The combined attack tore through the enemy's hull and came out the other side. "It worked," Mitchell announced happily. "I am calling that the Mitchell maneuver. Patent pending." As the battle continued, Admiral Zexhai began to understand what made humans so dangerous. They did not just fight as individuals. They fought as individuals who refused to follow any rules. Every human captain was essentially running their own private war against the swarm. The mechanical enemies had been designed to counter organized military tactics. They had no defense against organized chaos. "All swarm vessels in retreat," Captain Hart reported. "Should we pursue?" "Negative." Admiral Morrison replied. "Let them run. They will report back to their main fleet that humans are unpredictable and dangerous. That will make them cautious." "Why do we want them to be cautious?" Zexhai asked. "Because cautious enemies make mistakes," Morrison explained. "They hesitate when they should act. They think when they should fight. Caution is fear in disguise. And fear makes you weak." As the human fleet regrouped, Admiral Zexhai realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans were not just winning battles against a superior enemy. They were teaching the enemy to be afraid. For the first time since the Void Swarm had appeared, Admiral Zexhai began to believe that the galaxy might actually survive. The humans had done something that no other species had managed. They had made the machines doubt themselves. "Admiral Morrison," Zexhai said over the communication link, "your people fight like nothing I have ever seen. You turn chaos into strategy and destruction into art." "Thank you, Admiral," Morrison replied, "but we are just getting started. Wait until you see what we do when we really get angry." Looking at the wreckage of the swarm construction facility, Admiral Zexhai decided he did not want to see the humans when they were really angry. He was just glad they were on his side. The intelligence reports came in 3 days after the battle at Rigel. Admiral Zexhai studied the data with growing amazement. Across the galaxy, Void Swarm activities had changed completely. The machines that had been aggressively expanding for 3 years were now pulling back, consolidating their forces. "They are afraid," Commander Velshin said, looking at the tactical display. "The swarm is actually afraid of us." "Not us," Admiral Zexhai corrected. "They are afraid of the humans." Admiral Morrison joined the briefing via communication link from his flagship. Behind him, Captain Hart was coordinating repairs while her crew worked with the focused intensity that seemed normal for humans. "Admiral Morrison, our scouts report that the swarm is gathering their entire fleet at the Vega system," Zexhai said. "Every ship they have is moving there. It looks like they are preparing for a final battle." "Good," Morrison replied. "That means we hurt them badly enough to make them desperate. Desperate enemies make big mistakes." "But Admiral, Our combined forces are down to 800 operational ships. The swarm will have at least 3,000 vessels at Vega. The odds are impossible. Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Admiral, humans have been facing impossible odds since we learned to walk upright. Impossible just means we have to be creative. Captain Hart looked up from her damage. Reports, Admiral Morrison, I have an idea. It is completely insane and will probably get us all killed. Those are the best kind of ideas, Morrison replied. Tell me. The swarm is gathering around their main command ship at Vega. That vessel controls their entire network. If we could destroy it, the rest of their fleet would be leaderless. The command ship is protected by their entire fleet, Zexai protested. No force could fight through 3,000 vessels to reach it. Who said anything about fighting through them? Hart asked. What if we went through something else instead? She activated a stellar map showing the Vega system. The star itself was highlighted in bright yellow, with the swarm fleet positioned in a defensive sphere around the fourth planet. Vega is an unstable star, Hart explained. It has regular solar flare activity. The radiation and electromagnetic interference make it impossible for most species to operate close to the star. But human ships are built to handle extreme environments. Admiral Morrison nodded slowly. You want to attack through the star's corona. Use the solar radiation as cover. Exactly. We jump into the inner system, use the star itself to hide our approach, then hit the command ship before they know we are there. That is suicide, Commander Velshin said. The radiation levels near Vega would kill any crew within minutes. Any normal crew, Captain Hart corrected. But humans are not normal. Our ships have full radiation shielding, and our crews have genetic modifications for radiation resistance. We evolved on a planet with a damaged ozone layer, remember? Admiral. Zexai stared at the human officers. They were casually discussing flying through the corona of an active star as if it were a minor navigation problem. Even if your crews could survive, he said, your ships would be damaged by the radiation. Your weapon systems would fail. Maybe. Morrison agreed. But swarm ships are not designed for solar radiation either. They have been avoiding the inner system completely. If we attack from there, they will not be expecting us. Admiral Morrison, I must ask, Zexai said carefully, do your people have any concept of acceptable losses? Of course we do, Morrison replied. Acceptable losses are anything less than total extinction. Everything else is just details. The plan was insane, but it was also the only chance they had. The remaining alien ships would stay in the outer system, providing distraction and support. The human fleet would make the solar approach alone. Colonel Paul Martinez was put in charge of the assault force. His job was to lead Marines onto the swarm command ship and destroy it from the inside. His team included Sergeant Kelly Price, Lieutenant Chris Bell, and 30 other volunteers. Colonel Martinez, Admiral Zexai said during the final briefing, you realize this mission has almost no chance of success. Martinez shrugged. Admiral, I have been on dozens of missions with almost no chance of success. I am still here. Trick is to be too stubborn to die. But if you fail, the entire galaxy will fall to the void swarm. Then we will not fail, Sergeant Price said simply. Failure is not an option when the stakes are this high. The assault began 12 hours. Later, the human fleet jumped directly into Vega's inner system, emerging from hyperspace less than 1 million kilometers from the star's surface. The radiation levels would have been instantly fatal to most species. Solar radiation at acceptable levels. Captain Hart reported calmly. All ships showing green status. Beginning approach to target. Admiral Zexai watched from his position in the outer system as the human fleet disappeared into the star's glare. His sensors could not track them. through the electromagnetic interference, but he knew they were out there, flying through hell itself to reach their target. "Admiral Morrison, can you hear me?" He tried to call, but received only static in response. On the U-East Defiance, Captain Hart was navigating through solar flares that lit up space like fireworks. Her crew worked at their stations, as if flying. To a star was just another day at the office. Temperature rising on Deck 7, Chief Engineer Angela Ross reported, but still within acceptable parameters. "The new hull coating is working better than expected." "Good work, Ross," Hart replied. "How long until we reach attack position?" 15 minutes at current speed. The swarm command ship should be visible soon. The massive enemy vessel appeared through the solar radiation like a metal mountain floating. In space, it was larger than anything the humans had ever seen, bristling with weapons and surrounded by a defensive screen of smaller ships. "Target acquired," Hart announced. "All ships, prepare for attack. Remember, we only get one chance at this." A human fleet burst out of the star's corona like avenging angels made of metal and fire. The swarm defenders were completely unprepared for an attack from that direction. Their shields were positioned to protect against threats from the outer system, not from the star itself. "All fighters launch," Hart ordered. "Colonel Martinez, your boarding pods are away." 50,000 human fighters swarmed toward the command ship while Martinez and his Marines rode in heavily armored pods designed to punch through enemy hulls. The swarm tried to respond, but they were blinded by solar radiation and confused by the unexpected attack direction. "This is Martinez," came the colonel's voice over the static-filled communication system. "We have penetrated the enemy hull, beginning interior assault." Inside the command ship, Martinez and his team found themselves in an environment that would have killed most galactic species instantly. The gravity was crushing, the atmosphere was toxic, and the radiation levels were off the charts. "Just like training back home," Sergeant Price commented as they fought their way through corridors filled with mechanical defenders. "Except the robots here are uglier than the ones on Earth." The Marines moved through the ship like a force of nature, using weapons and tactics that the swarm had never encountered. When their guns ran out of ammunition, they used explosives. When their explosives ran out, they used anything they could find as weapons. "Command center located," Lieutenant Bell reported. "It is heavily defended, but we can reach it." "Then let us go introduce ourselves," Martinez said grimly. "These machines need to learn some manners." The final assault on the command center was brutal and desperate. The swarm threw everything they had at the human Marines, but Martinez and his team kept advancing. They had come too far and sacrificed too much to stop now. "Charges placed," Sergeant Price announced. "Command center is rigged to blow." "All teams fall back to extraction point," Martinez ordered. "We have 30 seconds." But as they ran through the collapsing ship, Martinez realized that the extraction pods had been destroyed in the fighting. They were trapped inside a ship that was about to explode. "Colonel, this is Captain Hart," came a voice through the static. "We cannot reach your position for pickup." Martinez looked at his remaining team. They had completed their mission, but they would not survive to see the victory. For a moment, he felt something that might have been fear. Then Sergeant Price spoke up. "Well, at least we got the job done. Not a bad way to go out, if you ask me." "Agreed," Martinez said, and suddenly he was not afraid anymore. "This is Colonel Martinez to all ships. Mission accomplished. The command center is destroyed. Take care of yourselves out there." The explosion that destroyed the swarm command ship could be seen across the entire Vega system. When the light faded, the massive vessel was gone, and with it, the central intelligence that had controlled the entire void swarm. Across the galaxy, swarm ships suddenly stopped moving. Without their command network, They became nothing more than lifeless metal drifting in space. The war was over, but Admiral Zexhai knew that the galaxy would never forget the price that had been paid. The humans had saved everyone, but they had done it in the most human way possible, by refusing to give up even when it meant certain death. In the hours after the swarm command ship exploded, the galaxy fell into an eerie silence. Across hundreds of star systems, the mechanical invaders simply stopped. Their ships drifted powerless through space like dead metal ghosts. The war that had threatened to destroy all organic life was over. Admiral Zexhai stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical displays with something between relief and disbelief. The red markers that had covered the galaxy for 3 years were turning gray one by one as swarm vessels went silent. All swarm ships in this sector have ceased activity, Commander Velshin reported. They are not responding to any signals. It appears their central intelligence network has been completely destroyed. Confirmed, came the voice of Captain Hart from the surviving human ships. The Void Swarm is finished. Without their command. Ship, they are just empty metal boxes floating in space. Admiral Zexhai activated the communication system to address the combined fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Zexhai. The threat has been eliminated. The Void Swarm is no more. We have achieved victory. The response from the alien crews was immediate and emotional. Cheers echoed across the communication channels as species that had faced extinction celebrated their survival. But the human response was different, as it always was. "Good work, everyone," Admiral Morrison said calmly. "Now let us clean up this mess and go home. We have been away from Earth long enough." Captain Hart began organizing the human fleet for departure, but Admiral Zexhai had to ask the question that was troubling him. "Admiral Morrison, your losses were enormous. You sacrificed hundreds of ships and thousands of crew members. How can you be so calm about such casualties?" Morrison was quiet for a moment before answering. "Admiral, every person in this fleet volunteered for this mission. They knew the risks. They knew many of them would not return home. But they also knew that if they did not fight, no one would return home. But the cost of victory is always high," Morrison replied. "But the cost of defeat would have been higher. We saved the galaxy, Admiral. That is worth any price." As the human fleet prepared to leave, representatives from every species in the Galactic Council requested permission to come aboard the human ships. They wanted to thank the people who had saved them all. Admiral Zexhai joined the delegation that visited the UESS Defiance. The ship showed clear signs of the brutal fighting it had endured. Burn marks covered the hull, and several sections were completely destroyed. But the crew moved through their duties with the same calm efficiency they had shown throughout the war. "Captain Hart," Admiral Zexhai said when they met in the ship's conference room, "I want to understand something. Your people faced impossible odds and certain death, yet they never showed fear. How is this possible?" Captain Hart smiled. "Admiral, fear is just another enemy to defeat. We learned that lesson long ago on Earth. Our world tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived by refusing to give up, no matter how bad things got. But surely you must have been afraid sometimes during the war." "Of course. We were afraid," Hart admitted. "Fear is a natural response to danger, but we do not let fear control us. We acknowledge it, and we do what needs to be done anyway." Counselor Valtar, who had insisted on joining the delegation despite her advanced age, spoke up. "Captain Hart, your species has taught us something important. We always believed that advanced technology and superior tactics were the keys to victory. But you showed us that determination and refusal to surrender are more powerful than any weapon." "Technology helps," Hart agreed. "But wars are won by people who refuse to lose." The Void Swarm had better technology than us. They had adaptive armor and superior numbers. But they made one critical mistake. What mistake? Admiral Zexhai asked. They tried to fight humans, Hart said simply. And humans do not know how to lose. We literally do not have that programming in our minds. When faced with extinction, we get angry. When faced with impossible odds, we get creative. When faced with certain death, we make sure to take our enemies with us. The meeting continued for several hours as the alien representatives tried to understand the human mindset. They learned about Earth's hostile environment, about humanity's long history of warfare, and about the cultural values that made humans so different from other species. Your people speak of death as if it is just another problem to solve, Commander Velshin observed. That is exactly what it is, replied Chief Engineer Angela Ross, who had joined the meeting. Death is just the universe's way of telling you to try harder. We have been telling the universe to go to hell for so long that it has become a habit. As the delegation prepared to leave, Admiral Morrison made an announcement that surprised everyone. The United Earth Space Command has decided to establish permanent defense stations throughout the galaxy, he said. We will leave behind volunteer crews to monitor for any remaining swarm activity or future threats. That is very generous, Admiral Zexhai said, but surely your people want to return home after such a long campaign. Some do, Morrison agreed, but others have volunteered to stay. They say the galaxy is too interesting to leave undefended. Besides, someone needs to make sure nothing like the Void Swarm ever threatens the peace again. Admiral Zexhai realized that humanity was offering something unprecedented in galactic history. They were volunteering to become the galaxy's protectors, asking for nothing in return except the knowledge that organic life would continue to exist. Why would you do this? He asked. What do you gain from protecting species you barely know? We gain the knowledge that we did the right thing, Morrison replied. Humans do not like bullies, Admiral. We never have. And we especially do not like bullies who pick on people smaller than themselves. As the human fleet began jumping back to Earth, Admiral Zexhai found himself thinking about the lessons they had learned. The galaxy had been saved not by superior technology or brilliant strategy, but by a species that simply refused to accept defeat. 3 months later, Admiral Zexhai received a message from Captain Sarah Brooks, who had volunteered to command one of the human defense stations. The message was typical of human communication, short, direct, and slightly irreverent. Admiral Zexhai, this is Captain Brooks reporting from Defense Station Alpha. All quiet on the galactic front. The coffee here is terrible, but the view is nice. We are keeping watch for any signs of trouble. If anyone else decides to threaten the galaxy, they will have to go through us first. Hope you and your people are doing well. Stay safe out there. Brooks out. Admiral Zexhai smiled as he read the message. The galaxy was indeed in good hands. The humans had not just saved organic life from extinction. They had appointed themselves as permanent guardians against future threats. In the years that followed, the story of humanity's intervention against the Void Swarm became legendary throughout the galaxy. Children of dozens of species learned about the Deathworlders who came from Sol 3, the people who looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. But for the humans themselves, the war against the Void Swarm was just another chapter in their long history of surviving against overwhelming odds. When asked about their role in saving the galaxy, they typically shrugged and said it was no big deal. Someone had to do it, they would say. Might as well be us. And across the galaxy, whenever any species faced a threat that seemed too big to handle, they would remember the humans and their simple philosophy. When something tries to destroy you, you destroy it first. When the odds are impossible, you fight anyway. When death comes calling, you tell it to wait its turn. The galaxy was safe because somewhere out there, the Deathworlders from Earth were standing guard. And nothing in the universe was foolish. Enough to test their resolve again, Admiral Zex High kept Captain Brooks' message on his desk as a reminder. Whenever he looked at it, he remembered the day that humanity's Deathworlder Armada saved the aliens, and he smiled. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Never pick a fight with someone who considers extinction just another problem to solve. The humans had not just won a war. They had redefined what it meant to never give up.